Alright guys, in this video I'm going to show you guys how to remove an EJ25 out of a 2010 Subaru Outback. We'll be doing the head gaskets, which I'm going to make a couple videos. One will show the head gaskets, one will show the whole timing belt process. But in this one I'm going to show you guys how to remove the engine. First thing I do, I start with the battery. So let's just take that off real quick. Okay. The next thing I like to do is start draining the coolant out of it while I'm working on taking off everything else from the top, just letting it drain. So it's going to be two 10mm bolts holding the thermostat housing. You want to remove that, take the thermostat out, make sure you got a pan underneath. It'll start to drain out. That'll let you drain the coolant while you're working up here, removing all your accessories. Alright, now that you got that loose, should look something like that. Just leave it under the exhaust manifold and just let it all drain out. Next, I like to take all the accessories out and this top radiator hose, so we'll just do that next. Forgot to mention, you're going to want to remove all these clips so you can get to this bracket holding down the radiator. So remove all these clips first. Alright, once you got this removed, you'll be able to access these two 12mm bolts. Go ahead and undo those. Alright, should look something like that. Let's go ahead and undo this radiator hose really fast. Okay. So now I might as well just remove this since it's done draining. There's going to be two connections for the fans. One's here on the left. The other one will be hidden underneath this little bracket for your coolant reservoir. Make sure to disconnect both of those and the radiator should come right out. So I forgot to mention, this is an automatic. You're going to have two transmission lines right there on the driver's side. Just go ahead and remove those. And they will spill transmission fluid, so make sure you grab another pan. So now we can start on these accessories. First thing you want to do is remove the serpentine belt. It tightens here by this tensioner, which is a 15mm. What I like to do is grab a long wrench like that. Pry it down, then you'll be able to see some slack and you can just remove it pretty easily. One tip would be to take a picture of it, that way you're not confused when you're putting it back on the car. So we'll remove this bracket here. It's a 12mm bolt here and a 10mm bolt there. Remove this harness to the alternator. It's a 12mm here, and yeah. So there were three connectors on this little harness. They each come off by just pressing down. They're pretty easy. You want to make sure all that's connected. Just push it to the side like so, just nice and tucked away, out of your way. Next, you want to remove this pulley. It's a 14mm. It's in your way from this bolt here, so you want to remove that first. To remove the alternator, all you gotta do is take out these two 12s and it should come right out. Alternator's out. I usually keep the bolts attached to the alternator, that way I don't lose them. Next, we'll remove the power steering. Should be 1, 2, 3 12mm bolts. Plus you got to remove this bracket here, which are 14mm bolts. Now that that's loose, I like resting it up here, but in order to do that, we're gonna have to remove this air box. So remove this little lid, disconnect the mass airflow sensor, and should come right out. Once you pop this lid, there's gonna be a clamp holding it. Just undo it, and that should break free. There's gonna be a hose underneath it. Remove that. And that should be it. Should come right out. All right, now that that's out of the way, you can go ahead and move this. Make sure to disconnect this connector on the back of the power steering. And go ahead and move it. Just tuck it to the side like that, out of the way. And we can work our way and remove the AC compressor. The AC compressor has 4 14mm bolts, one here in the front, one here on top, one in the back, which is a little hard to get to. I don't know if you can see that. And then one more down here. So remove those 4. This should be able to move and tuck away over here by the battery and just be out of your way. Now that that's out of the way, I usually go and take off the fuel lines, and then I remove the O2 sensor connectors. So for the fuel lines, you're gonna want this tool to remove the quick release. That's how it goes there. All you do is just pull it. And it comes right off. The other one's easy. Just a little clamp. Might as well get this line too while we're here. Just remove both of them. Next step I usually do is remove the whole intake manifold. Bolts wise, there's going to be 4 12mm bolts, 1, 2 in the middle, 1 on the outside for both sides, so a total of 8. You're also going to want to remove all connectors that belong to the harness, as well as these hoses here on each side. There's also the EGR pipe in the back. It's a 22mm size. You're going to want to remove that as well. And then these little sensors up here up front, you could go ahead and remove all that too. Also, don't forget to disconnect the harness. You lift this tab up and it releases this. When you press this tab down, this will come off and release it there. So also remove this 12mm bolt here for the ground, and these connectors here for the VVT, all that stuff. Should be it. There's also 2 hoses connected by the throttle body for coolant. There's one right there, and the other one right here. Okay, with the intake out of the way, we could keep moving on. I did forget to mention there's a knock sensor connector right there, and another little connector you gotta disconnect unless you want to rip these off while you're taking the intake manifold off. But other than that, that's it. Next thing you're going to want to do is remove this cover and undo the torque converter bolts. So you're going to want to grab a 22mm socket, turn that to about right there. So what I do is I put the 12mm on this tool and it'll break it. Twist the rest. With my fingers and just repeat the process. Alright, as you can see, torque converter is free now. You're going to want to remove these two heater hoses. Once those are off, you'll be able to access all the transmission bolts, the 14mm. So go ahead and remove those. And one tip is, remember which one went where, because it can be a little confusing sometimes. I use this as a little guide to show me which direction these go in. With that out of the way, you're gonna want to break the transmission bolts. There's one here on the top of the starter, one on the bottom. There's a hidden one actually right under the starter. It's really easy to miss. And you want to break this one here, that one there, and that's it for the top. You also want to break the top of this bracket here that holds that bracket down to the mount. There's one on each side, so there's one there. There's one here, so one on each side, and those are 14mm bolts as well. That is the hidden bolt that I'm talking about. Really easy to miss if this is your view because of this bracket here. But you want to break that too. Okay, all that is removed. It's time to go underneath the car. I'll show you what to take off. Okay, we are now into the car. So you will have to remove those two bolts there. This is the right side. There's another two on that side. I'll show you what I use that helps me remove that pretty easily. I like to use this setup here. A long extension with a swivel and a short 14. There we go, like so. It'll actually rest on the axle, which will give you leverage. And it'll brake, hopefully, with a little bit of force. So, alright, that upper bolt, what I like to do is grab a longer 14mm socket. You want to put your arm through the lower controller and over here. It's a lot easier to see on this side. And my arm wraps around there. And this makes it really easy to break that bolt. All we have left is this exhaust manifold. There's 3 14mm bolts on each side, so a total of 6. I use an extension with the long 14mm socket. There should be 2 grounds, one on each side, and those are 10mm bolts. Once you remove this, the motor is basically ready to come out. So now, just come down just like that. like to leave that 14mm bolt right there, just because now it holds it up. So when you put the motor back, it's actually, you don't have to pick it up from the ground. It's just at a nice place to lift it a little bit. So just my advice. So now you got everything disconnected. Last thing you're gonna want to do is take these 14mm bolts off. There's 2 here, and there's 1 going through the mount right there. You're also gonna want to put, I have this spare one laying around with the quick release because I do this often. But if you don't have that, you're gonna want to just take this off from the AC compressor, put it back on with like a rope, whatever you want. That way your engine hoist could pull the motor up from there. So once this bracket's off, the motor will be free. Should be able to just lift up. You might have to help it. Yep, you might have to help pry it here a little bit, but it should come out. I will be doing the timing belt, water pump, head gaskets on this motor. I'll be doing separate videos on each of those. So if you want to see how that's done, just follow along. Catch you guys in the next one.